Hello, my name is Salah Nasri, and welcome back to the Semiconductor Leadership Podcast, the podcast dedicated to tech executives, notably in the semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem, to enhance their personal lives and careers. So, the previous episode was part 1 to the book Only the Paranoid Survive, and in this episode, we will cover part 2 of the author and the great leader himself, Andy Grove, former CEO of Intel, who is known for maximizing Intel to its optimum prime points. So jumping straight into it, focusing on employees, Andy Grove says that employees are emotionally attached to their company, and leaders must solicit objective opinions from outsiders. Companies in critical situations often employ consultants to analyze their business and to suggest an effective course of action. Now, the reason for employing consultants in this role is that they have an objective perspective on the situation. And in contrast, those working for the company are often emotionally involved in the work they do, which means that their opinions are biased. And the reason for this level of involvement is that work is often an essential part of a person's self-image, and a change in what they do brings their entire personality into question. And people can feel very comfortable and at home in their team, and therefore tend to resist any change to it. For example, when Intel went through the memory crisis, some of its oldest production fabs were running at a loss. And the result was that they had to be shut down and their resources redeployed to other plants. Many among the senior staff resisted their developments because they were attached to the origin story that they played a role in. They remembered when those plants or fabs were first opened in the early days of that story. As far as possible, leaders should try to make themselves immune to such attachments and instead adopt the more objective view of an outsider to shift their own perspective. Seeing the business with fresh eyes can be accomplished, and this is done, for example, by talking to consultants or employing new people. At the same time, however, leaders must always be open to the criticisms that will probably come their way, and outsiders are more likely to see the flaws and mistakes that insiders will just as likely miss. Faced with such criticisms, leaders will have to ensure their egos do not get in the way if they're identified with whatever decision or action is being criticized. So, to stay current in the market, companies need open communication with employees, outside experts, conferences, and journalists. And many companies trying to keep certain information secret, especially when it concerns new strategies and products. However, this secrecy can mean that a business's upper management will fail to pass crucial information down to middle management about goals and strategies. Neglecting to maintain open communication between upper and middle management is obviously ill-advised. And this is because staff in the middle of the company are often first to identify a business's problem. For one thing, they're closer to its daily operations and are therefore sensitive to the slight changes that can accumulate to a threatening situation. And for that reason, they should be encouraged to openly communicate their fears and observations, as often they have good ideas about how businesses can be run differently. For example, Grove received an email from a sales manager in the Asia Pacific area, in which the manager discussed a potential competitor. Faced with this new information, Grove decided to initiate a study on the case. Had the sales manager not felt comfortable informing Grove, Grove wouldn't have been aware of the competitor's existence per se. Other people with whom companies should always maintain close contact are business partners, outside experts and journalists, and industry peers at conferences, as they have a broader view on the market situation as a whole. So, for instance, a company should stay in touch with its complementer, as they are a driving force behind the business. And by keeping close to outside experts, a company's senior management is able to learn of market constellations which they'd otherwise not recognize. And lastly, of course, journalists. If they ask critical questions, it can lead a manager to a welcome shift in perspective. And change in the business environment can come from anywhere, even from within. And that's why it's important to stay on the watch and get information from as many sources as possible. Companies, of course, need to build flexible teams of creative staff who are comfortable with change. The culture of a company can be a decisive factor in its ability to survive periods of great trouble. If people are not challenged with new problems, they become accustomed to the current situation and are then less flexible in times of major change. This kind of mindset can be deadly for a company when hitting an SIP. So it's essential both that employees are accustomed to acquiring new skills, that the team is flexible. And this is because, firstly, people who acquire a variety of skills are able to reflect on a situation from multiple points of view. And those employees habituated to learning are able to adjust to new tasks more easily. If an employee is able, for example, to think outside the box, with the box being his or her direct working field, he or she will be well positioned to find better solutions to the working processes. Secondly, a team that is flexible creates a trusting environment in which new ideas can develop and prosper. Indeed, creativity can grow only in an environment where people are free to search for their own solutions. Thus, employees should be made to feel comfortable, suggesting trying out new ideas and practices, such as the redeployment of resources. Another benefit to team flexibility is that staff morale will increase, because it's quite simply more enjoyable to work in a climate that encourages individuals to be creative, and that remains flexible to individual desires and suggestions. So in sum, mutual trust and flexibility lead to a positive working climate. They train people to unite in critical situations and come up with new ways to resolve challenges. So, actionable ideas you can take from this book is: look to outsiders for an objective opinion. Even though they might be emotionally attached to a particular image or origin story of their company, managers should always try to view their company situation as objectively as possible. If a new, scary situation arises, one should always seek impartial counsel from outside the company and consider all the options one has and then act decisively. So, I hope you have learned as much as I have learned from this incredible book. It's a marvelous book. I highly recommend it. And the most key thing to elevate this podcast is simply subscribe. The more followers we have in the back end, the more interesting this podcast will get. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any comments, please comment below. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode, which will be focused on intermittent fasting. Take care and see you at the next episode.